Hello everyone, it's time for another live look at the astrology. My name is Katie Sweetman and this is your look at the astrology for November 3rd through 9th, 2025. So we've got a lot of things to cover this week. We have a lot of movements in the sky. It's November, it's Scorpio season, but we have Venus going into Scorpio this week. We also have Uranus returning back to that's better. Uranus returning back to Taurus. We have Mars going into Sagittarius this week. That's with the opposition to Uranus. And what else? We have a Taurus full moon and Mercury turning retrograde. So that's a lot of things that are going on. And typically, when things are moving in the sky, it means the story is changing, our priorities are shifting, events are coming into our life. So let's sort of dive in. And for those that don't know who I am, my name is Katie Sweetman, and I'm an astrologer and psychic medium located here in the rolling hills of Central Maryland. And every week we gather live to look at the astrology. You hear me say it every week. The astrology is 50%. You are the other 50%. Don't forget about the part that's you. We are an international audience, so if you are watching live, or even if you're not watching live, because some of you are on my Tuesday Club, do say hello. It's nice to see where people are watching from. We had a lot of Canadians last week, so hello. But that said, let's dive in. So welcome to November. This is actually a key month for the year, not let's say as key as September and the two eclipses we had, but we have a couple of things to keep on our radar for throughout the month. First, it's Mars in Sagittarius. I'll go more in depth in that in a moment, but Mars is going to start to activate eclipse degrees from December. The other thing, and this is something that we'll continue to talk about as we get closer to the end of the month, Saturn is going to turn direct on the 27th. That's right around the time that Mars makes its first activation of an eclipse degree. It will get to the degree of the September 7th lunar eclipse in Pisces. And it just sort of says that there's something about the end of November where personal events, perhaps even collective events, are really building around that point. Saturn is one of the most important planets that we need to pay attention to in astrology. It really talks about how things are unfolding, how things are unbuilding. And one of the things about 2025 into the beginning of 2026 is that we are wrapping up chapters that began in 2023, 2012, 2011, 2012, and also, which we'll learn about this week, 2018 and 2019. So let's start with Mars, because Mars is going to go into Sagittarius on the 4th. That's tomorrow as I record this. And Mars is what's called the ruler of Scorpio season. So it holds the energy of the sign, it holds the energy of the sun. And since the end of September, Mars has been in Scorpio. So Mars has been in its home sign. It's been strong. It's been enjoying itself, perhaps, in Scorpio. When it moves into Sagittarius tomorrow, it brings the energy of the season towards a fire sign. Now, I talked about this last week, but we've got a lot of planets in the water signs. Water sun, the sun is in Scorpio, Mars until tomorrow is in Scorpio. We've got Jupiter in Cancer, we've got Neptune and Saturn in Pisces. That's what's called a grand water trine. That's go back and listen to last week's recording to learn a little bit more about that. Water is emotional. Water moves things. Water opens up our intuition. Water prepares us for transition. But water can get a little heavy, and with some fire, we have Mercury is in Sagittarius, and then Mars in Sagittarius is going to give us some fire. Fire energy is about motivation, inspiration, taking action, moving forward, new beginnings. And the fire of Sagittarius, which is what's called the last fire sign, it's the fire of the stars. It's not the fire, say, of Aries, which is about renewal. It's that first burst of life that we get each year at the beginning of the spring, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. It's not the fire of the sun, Leo, the sun of the self, creativity, self-expression. It's the fire of the stars. It's no coincidence that the center of our galaxy, if you were to see the Milky Way, you can't see it this time of year, but if you could see the Milky Way, you would see it along parallel with the constellation of Sagittarius. Sagittarius represents the center of our galaxy, so that's both an astronomical fact, but it's also a place in the sky that helps us to look home, to look up, to go beyond ourselves. And Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter, it wants more out of life. It wants to travel, it wants to explore, it wants to try to get the answers to life's bigger questions. And so when Mars is there, Mars is about action, it's about the physicality of life. It really moves us to take that action towards Sagittarius. Maybe we're thinking about planning a trip. Maybe we want to go abroad. Maybe we want to go very far. Sagittarius is also a sign that's about wisdom and knowledge, although the wisdom and knowledge is typically more earthly, meaning we get an education, we get a degree, we read all the books we can, we have a strong sense of philosophy, or perhaps even right and wrong. Mars in Sagittarius, I have Mars in Sagittarius, it likes to rally people behind a cause. It takes the fire of the stars and it uses it like a torch. You know, look up, everybody. Look what I have discovered. So there's a bigness, a grandness to Mars and Sagittarius, but like all signs of the zodiac, there's always a plus and a minus. There's always a constructive side of Mars and Sagittarius, and there's always, let's say, a destructive side to Mars and Sagittarius, and that is opinions and being judgmental. So this is something that we all just need to be careful of, is that Mars can be very enthusiastic in Sagittarius. Sometimes it can be a little too enthusiastic. It can shoot its mouth off, so to speak, but it can also be very opinionated. So we have to sort of remember to keep our vision wide, to keep our minds open, to keep looking towards the stars. And my joke with Sagittarius, especially if we have lessons to learn in Sagittarius, is 99% of the time with Sagittarius, Sagittarius is correct. But it's just that 1% every time that gets Sagittarius. So maybe we need to say over the next 6 weeks, you know what, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I need to see something from a different point of view or a different perspective. And that will allow Sagittarius to have some breathing room. When Mars goes into Sagittarius, it takes the energy of Scorpio season, which I was saying a few moments ago, and it says to Sagittarius and it says to Scorpio, you know, what do you believe in? What do you stand for? Scorpio is typically looking inward. It's very psychologically driven. It wants to understand things. It's really driven by intimacy, power, vulnerability, trust, rebirth. But it's through that with Sagittarius that we need to share our experiences. We need to share our discoveries. My dog's trying to get in the door. We need to share our discoveries, and that's where Sagittarius really has that power to be a great motivator, but also even a great storyteller. When Mars goes into Sagittarius, there's my dog. When Mars goes into Sagittarius, it starts to make an opposition to Uranus. This is actually a pretty powerful aspect, one that we need to be, I don't want to say careful because I don't like to sort of put that necessarily out there, but it is a fast energy. It can sometimes rush forward in a way where it's not grounded. So we need to make sure that we're really grounded with this opposition to Mars. High side of Mars opposite Uranus, it wants us to see things from a different perspective, to open up our eyes, to reinvent ourselves, to break free. Uranus as an evolutionary planet, as an evolutionary force, it tries to get us to break free from the past. So if there is something that is holding you back, you feel stuck, certainly Uranus can help you to get unstuck, or at least to consider different avenues or different perspectives to get you unstuck. It can be a disruptive energy. It just sort of lends itself as a question mark to the entirety of the week. It says as we go into Scorpio season, as we go into November, what is beginning to shift and change? What is confronting us? What wants to illuminate? And what wants to perhaps even come from a different direction, because again, Uranus is all about that evolutionary energy. As I said earlier, Uranus in Sagittarius means it's going to start to square. It's going to start to activate that eclipse energy from September 7th of 2025 and also September 21st of 2025. So it says it also lends itself to a question mark to November, and even as we get into December. So we have Mars going into Sagittarius, we have Venus going into Scorpio. So Venus has been in Libra for the last 4 weeks, and it's going into Scorpio. It sort of adds to that energy of things changing, stories changing, and Venus, classically speaking, it's not at home in Scorpio because it's a sign where Venus has to work against its instincts. Venus is typically like, hey, whatever you want, let's figure things out, let's compromise, let's negotiate, which are really important and valuable traits to really cultivate. But in Scorpio, it's through the energies of Mars. It uses relationships and sometimes even seduction to get what it wants. There is a high side to Venus in Scorpio, and that's where we really learn the power and also the value of intimacy, vulnerability. And there's a sense of real intimacy with Venus in Scorpio. And if you've ever gone through a difficult period of your life and you've had that person that you can say anything to, or you know that they're there, that's that sense of Scorpio reliability, and that's the positive side of Venus in Scorpio. We also have Uranus going into Taurus. So let's say Mars goes into Sagittarius tomorrow, the 4th. We will have a full moon on the 5th, which I'll get to. Venus goes into Scorpio on the 6th. Uranus goes back into Taurus on the 7th. So Uranus first went into Taurus way back May 15th of 2018, March 6th of 2019, and it had not been in Taurus in our lifetime. Now, there, of course, are some people who are alive when Uranus was in Taurus. You are probably in your 90s at this point, but for the most of us, that we have not been alive with Uranus in Taurus. And this has been the last 7 years. And Uranus as this energy of evolution, transformation, revolution, it has brought that energy to Taurus, which is typically a sign that wants stability, security, to keep everything the same. Now, has anything been the same since it was 2018, 2019? Absolutely not. And I'm saying this as a Scorpio, so I've had the opposition over the last 7 years. I was born with Uranus in Scorpio, so I had the Uranus opposition a couple years ago. And in 2019, I quit my day job to become an astrologer full-time. Like, side note, you can book a consultation with me. And life, without getting into the sad details, there's been a lot of changes in the past few years. And I'm just sort of speaking from my own experience. If you are a Taurus, a Scorpio, a Leo, an Aquarius, it is possible, although this is not going to be 100% for everybody, it is possible that life looks very different than it did 7 years ago. For all of us, something began to shift. Something began to demand a transformation, a new perspective. And when I go through each of the 12 signs, we'll just quickly refresh ourselves what that is. Uranus going back into Taurus, it's not earth-shattering. Like, it's taking us back to a story that we already know. We've been living it for the last 7 years. But we have something that we need to wrap up. Maybe we really need to live the values that we now value as opposed to we didn't value in 2018-19. Maybe we need to make that last big push to change and transform something. It's going to be very specific to your own life. Going back to Mars opposite Uranus, Mars is making its opposition to Uranus at 0 degrees of Gemini. So Mars is sort of like, passing by as Uranus goes back into Taurus. But there is a story that and maybe this is one of those things just to sort of circle in your brain or to put it in your journal. take note of the kind of conversations that you're having this week, the ideas that are coming up, the new directions that you want to head into, maybe even the personal events that are happening, because this is our first real, real connection to Uranus and Gemini. We had the new moon in Virgo back on August 23rd. Yeah, August 23rd. That was also a time where we got a taste of Uranus and Gemini. But Mars is about making things happen. So Uranus will go back into Gemini August 25th of 2026. So 5 months from now. And there is we're getting a hint of some story that may be present with us over the next 6-7 years. So there you go. Also this week, Mercury turns retrograde. That will be on Sunday, the 9th. Mercury turns retrograde at 6 degrees of Sagittarius. I'm going to table that to next week because there's just so much going on. I'm generally, and hopefully you all know this by now, I don't believe the sky is falling when Mercury turns retrograde. We don't need to grind our lives to a halt. But we need to understand that any time a planet turns retrograde, there is something that we need to take a second look at. We need to consider different points of view. We need to go within. A retrograde is a yin phase of energy. It's not yang, it's not active, it's not moving forward, it's pulling inward. Retrograde in direct motion, it represents the natural duality of the universe, these sort of night and day, yes, no, up, down. And we need to honor the fact that with Mercury retrograde, maybe we're not pushing forward. Maybe we need to go back and retrace our steps. And maybe that's the universe telling us to get in touch with the feminine, the yin, the intuitive, as opposed to always being in the active state. Again, we'll table that for next week. So let's also talk about this Taurus full moon. So we have a Taurus full moon this week on the 5th. It is sandwiched between a lot of astrology, as I was saying in the introduction, and a full moon is always a time when our lives or some aspect of our lives is in the spotlight. If we are Taurus, it's us, or it could be our career if we're Leos, or it could be another part of our lives. And full moons are typically dynamic times. Taurus in general as a sign, it's what's called the first earth sign. It's a sign that really wants us to pay attention to our material needs, our wants, our desires. This isn't a comment about materialism, but it's just a reminder that we still live in a physical body. We still live in a physical reality. And hopefully we should be so lucky to be able to take care of those basic needs, because of course not everybody can. But it is a week to really look at your basic needs. Are you getting your basic needs met? What do you need to do in terms of resources, money, income, to strategize and even plan towards the future? Because we often forget that Taurus is part of the fixed cross, which includes Aquarius, which includes strategizing towards the future with the support, of course, of Scorpio and Leo. And so Taurus does a really great job when it sort of makes those financial plans and it strategizes towards the future. It has a 401k. My joke with Taurus clients is that typically they've got it all figured out. They've got the job, they've got the paycheck, they're not trying to mess with that sort of thing. And maybe we could all learn something from that. But how do you create stability and security in your life? In what way is ever, of course, relevant for you, because we all have different needs and wants. Taurus is also a sign that is ruled by Venus. It is about comfort, pleasure, enjoying the physicality of life. It is fertility, and it stands in contrast to the Scorpio sun, because the Scorpio sun is in a sign, the sun is in a sign that is about the ending of a cycle. Things are dying, the leaves are changing, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere. When the sun is in Taurus, typically, again, Northern Hemisphere, it is the rebirth of life. It is the blooms of life. Even in the depths of Scorpio season, just past Halloween and Samhain and all these sort of transitions and Day of the Dead, that we can also remember that with death comes life. and that the clearing of space with Scorpio season prepares us symbolically to re-enter Taurus. And the cycle keeps going because the fixed signs really talk about our physical material lives. I don't mean material money. I mean, the fact that we are here in a physical world. And so that dance that happens between Scorpio and Taurus and Scorpio is something that will go on until the end of time. And it could be, sometimes it's difficult to go through a period of loss or something's not quite working, but how do we use this energy or this season to really put to rest or lay to rest or to clear space for the things that really need to be laid to rest, so to speak? Always knowing, especially with this Taurus full moon, that there is new life. There's always a chance to have new life. We don't have to wait 6 months to go into Taurus season. So I always love the interplay between Taurus and Scorpio. Maybe I'm a little bit biased because I am a Scorpio and I attract Tauruses into my life. And my joke is, I have Tauruses in my life and they're always like, don't take things so seriously. And I'm like, but all things die. And they're like, just, eat a sandwich. And so that's where we have to find that balance between sort of the seriousness and the heaviness of Scorpio season and also the pleasure and the joy of Taurus as a sign. So that full moon is going to be at 13 degrees of Taurus. It'll be at 8:20 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, at least here East Coast United States where I am. And it will pick up on Venus in Libra. It hasn't gone into Scorpio at that point. And so we get a lot of Venusian energy this week: compromise, values, relationships, investments, self-worth, stability, security, and also pleasure. So that's something as we even navigate into next week. So let's look at each of the 12 zodiac signs because that was a lot. You can always book a consultation with me. We can see how this astrology is unfolding for you. We are about to go into the end of the year, and 2026 is going to be a very interesting year. Question mark. So let's go through each of the 12 zodiac signs, starting with Aries. Aries, so your planet Mars, it's on the move. It's been 6 weeks where it's been doing a lot of inner work, a lot of emotional heavy lifting, themes around trust and vulnerability, power, control, maybe even financial themes. And so Mars going into Sagittarius will pick up on the energy of fire, which will give you a lift because it's just been a lot. And let's not forget, Aries, you still have Saturn now, Neptune in your 12th. You are wrapping up a major cycle, and this is going to take you into February. With Mars in Sagittarius, it's to begin to ask yourself, if you haven't already, what do you believe in? What do you stand for? What do you think is true? Which way is up? Which is yes for you? What is no for you? Do you have a sense of inner compass, or perhaps even a sense of right and wrong? For some Aries, the next few weeks, and this will take you into the middle of December, it's a lot of travel, it's a lot of exploration. For some Aries, it's about education. For other Aries, it could be philosophical in nature. When Mars goes into Sagittarius, it makes an opposition to Uranus. It's a pretty powerful aspect that comes to exact tomorrow on the 4th. This is an energy that sometimes makes us want to make big changes and move very quickly. And it's not to say that that's not a bad thing, but just make sure that you are really grounded and anchored if you are rushing headlong into something. Because Mars and Uranus wants to break you free and certainly wants to break you from the past. We also have Venus going into Scorpio, so it's going to continue this theme around relationships and trust and vulnerability, power, control as we go over the next 4 weeks. And then we have a Scorpio full moon, not Scorpio full moon, so a Taurus full moon. This Taurus full moon is in your second sign of money, income, material stability, and security. So this could just be a very nuts and bolts full moon for you to really look at your finances, the money that you make, the resources that you have. For some of you, it's not financial. It's a little bit more philosophical and like feeling safe, feeling secure, feeling that you can get everything that you need. And for some of you, it really truly is about value and worth, and making sure that you are really investing your time, perhaps even your money, in the things that are truly of value to you, Aries. Taurus. Taurus. So you got a lot of stuff going on in your sign right now. We have, number one, we have Venus changing signs this week. Venus is going to go into Scorpio. Scorpio is your relationship sign. So for the next 4 weeks, this takes you into the beginning of December. Your priority is the other people in your life. It doesn't have to be relationships like an intimate relationship, unless you do have intimate relationships in your life. But it's also a time for you to really take your energy and to put it towards the other people that are in your life. Socialization and connection. A Taurus full moon lights up your astrology. It puts you in the spotlight. As a result, there may be things going on in your life this week. Personal events, new beginnings, or something that's really pushing you and motivating you to take action. The energy of the full moon points towards your sixth sign of Libra, so it could be about a project, it could be about work, it could be needing to take command or lead on some personal affairs or again some projects. It even could be health and wellness related. We also have Mars going to Sagittarius. Sagittarius is something called your eighth sign. So this is over the last 6 weeks, you've had Mars in your seventh sign of relationships. Things have been a little perhaps hot and spicy in that part of your life. When Mars goes into the eighth, it says that for the next 6 weeks, you've got some emotional heavy lifting to do. Mars is trying to give you the courage and bravery to open up, to find your intimacy, your vulnerability, to navigate themes around trust, power, and control. For some, this is also about financial matters, really planning for the future, your benefits, your 401k, your estate planning. I know that's not very glamorous, but that could be another way that you're really seeing the energy play out over the next 6 weeks. What else we got going on? We do have Mercury turning retrograde. Mercury is both a, I gotta do my math correctly. Mercury is a planet that talks about money and income for you. So this is just because there's a lot of financial things that are being activated in your astrology right now. Taurus, don't make big investments over the next 5-6 weeks. I'm not the person that typically says not to do something during Mercury retrograde, but for you, it does have a financial side of things, and that's it. Gemini. So there's a lot of stuff going on in your astrology this week. Let's sort of rewind a little bit. Since July 7th, you have had a visitor in your sign. You've had Uranus and Gemini for the first time in your life, unless you were born in the 1940s, then you had it when you were a child, but for a lot of us, first time in your life. And this is the start of some sort of big shift in your life. I know that's a big thing to say, but Uranus in your sign, especially if we were to fast forward 7 years, things are going to change. New directions, reinventions, transformations. And so the last, 4 months have been trying to give you a preview of something. Uranus actually leaves Gemini. It leaves on the 7th, so Friday. It will return in April, and that's 5 months from now. But that's sort of this energy that's being activated this week. Plus, we have Uranus. It's not Uranus. We have Mars going into Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is your relationship sign. Wherever Mars is, that is our immediate priority. That is our focus for the next 6 weeks. And when the focus is on relationships, and Sagittarius is your relationship sign, it is about other people in your life, whether it is about your primary relationships, maybe you're in a marriage or a partnership or a long-term relationship, or maybe this is just about how you connect, relate, and socialize with people. Mars is not the negotiator, and Mars can sometimes press buttons. So it's possible that something between you and another person may come up, especially if it's already been simmering on the back burner. For some Geminis, it's not that, but really taking the call of Mars to connect, to socialize more. to spend more time with people. That's the way in which you could be feeling this energy. Your planet, Mercury, does turn retrograde on the 9th, and Mercury turning retrograde just says that for the next 4 weeks, it's a 3 to 4 weeks, it's a time to go within, to retrace your steps, to see things from a different perspective. Mercury is going to be going from Sagittarius, your relationship sign, back to Scorpio, which is health and wellness for you, work and projects. So start to pay attention what is coming up in relationships, especially as Mars goes into Sagittarius, because it might be something that you need to go back and see things from a different perspective, clean something up, and it might play out even into the end of November, into the beginning of December. When Mars goes into Sagittarius on Tuesday, it makes that opposition to Uranus and Gemini. Yeah, and I said this in the introduction, this is kind of a bigger point, and it's not to overthink it, but the seeds of something are being planted this week that could very well play out over the next 7 years. You're only probably going to have Mars opposite Uranus and Gemini maybe 2 more times, because Mars has a 2-year cycle. And so this is something that's going to take you into the next 7 years. So really just not think, but just observe, what are the themes that are coming up this week for you? Like, how is it opening up a very different story in your life, or at least giving you the clues of it? Maybe that's true for you, maybe that's not true for you, but it's just something for you. Perhaps that's something for you to journal. We also have a Taurus full moon. Taurus is something called your 12th sign. When we have a full moon in the 12th, it says that something has come to an end. I know that that's a big thing to say, but everything has its own time. So if something has come to an end, you need to release something, you need to let it go. If it's not that, it's also a time to use the full moon, the illumination of the full moon, into a space that's very quiet, very sacred, and very spiritual. So for you, Gemini, with everything that's going on, maybe that's to make space for the new things that want to come into your life. But as new things want to come in, perhaps something wants to leave. And maybe that requires for you with this full moon to have some quiet time so that you can reflect and to look within. Cancer. So the moon is your planet, and the moon this week is going from Aries all the way to, all the way to Cancer. I think, if I remember, yes, all the way to Cancer. So for you, Aries is something called your 10th sign. It's your public life, your public duties, your career. And so by the middle of the week, we have a Taurus full moon on the 5th. Taurus is something called your 11th sign. This is a full moon that really puts in the spotlight your friends, your community, and maybe there's something that's happening with a friend or something that's happening in your community. And with Venus in Libra, the energy of the full moon is pointing towards home and family, or the household. Maybe it's about really making sure that there's a strong emotional connection with the people who are within your social circle, your friend group. Maybe it is something about family. Maybe it is something about your living situation. Maybe the full moon is not community. Maybe it's about looking towards the future and really trying to have a vision of the future that you want to create. Okay, well, if you have a vision for the future that you want to create, then how do you really plant the roots that are going to allow this future to come into reality? By the end of the week, the moon is going into your 12th, and that takes you into the weekend. The 12th is typically a time to rest, to go within. And then when the moon gets into Cancer this weekend, it's about new beginnings and renewals. This is something that happens every month. That said, let's talk about the big astrology that's happening this week, namely Mars. Mars is a career planet for you, but that said, Mars is going into Sagittarius. Sagittarius is something called your, I gotta do some quick math, your sixth sign. Your sixth sign, did I do it the wrong way for the other sign? Yeah, no, I did it right. I'm sorry, going backwards. Mars is going into Sagittarius, your sixth sign. So over the next 6 weeks, typically when Mars is in the sixth sign, we're very busy. We have a lot of work to do. We have projects. We have things that are happening on a day-to-day life. You're really doing that daily grind with Mars and Sagittarius. And my personal philosophy with Mars, because Mars is a very physical planet, is to give it an outlet. Give it an outlet by taking a walk or going to the gym or starting a project, because Mars just can't just sit there and do nothing. It really wants to clean things out. It wants to really focus on the operations of your life. Now, when Mars goes into Mars goes into Sagittarius, it makes an opposition to Uranus in Gemini. This is kind of a bigger conversation. It's a little bit more esoteric, because Uranus going into your 12th over the next 7 years says that you are in a time where you're trying to open up to a deeper spirituality, or to see things about yourself and your life that you don't typically see. So this opposition might give you a different perspective. You might be thinking about values differently and the things that you really want to create in your life. What else do we have going on? That is it. So Venus will go into Scorpio this week for you. Cancer. Scorpio is your 5th sign of creativity, self-expression, and so it kind of gives you a bit of a boost, creative boost for the next 4 weeks. Leo. So the sun is your planet, and the sun right now is in Scorpio. Scorpio forms the base and foundation of your personal astrology, which you could say that Scorpio holds up your life. It's kind of a funny thing to think, because you're a Leo, like Scorpio holds up my life. So every time the sun goes through Scorpio, it's a time to focus on roots, foundation, home, family, past memories. That said, we have a full moon this week. This full moon is in Taurus, opposite Scorpio, and Taurus is something called your 10th sign. It's your career, it's your public life. And this full moon for you, Leo, could be putting you in the spotlight in some way. It could be a week for you to get noticed for something, or to really put yourself out there and on a public stage, so to speak, or maybe something is happening in your professional life as well. This full moon is highlighting what's called your 3rd sign, is voice, communication, how you think and listen and learn. So maybe you have something to say, maybe you have something doing public speaking, maybe you're writing, maybe you're working on a manuscript, maybe you're publishing something, maybe you're teaching something. That could be one of the ways in which the full moon plays out in your life. Mars going into Sagittarius. So Sagittarius is a fellow fire sign, and that fire sign is that energy that really activates that Leo creativity, that joy, that play, that fun. And maybe that's a nice counter to some of the heaviness of, let's say, the water energy that we're seeing in the sky, and even the Scorpio sun. For the next 6 weeks, it's about coming back to what lights you up, what gives you joy, what gives you passion. And with Mars going into Sagittarius, it makes an opposition to Uranus and Gemini. It's kind of about you and the world, or you and your social circle. And like, how do you find the balance between being yourself, but also to be yourself in the world? If it's not that, maybe it's about identity, or maybe it's about how do you share the best of your talents, your gifts, and your abilities, and to put them out there in the world. Uranus is going back into Taurus this week. It'll spend the next 5 months in Taurus, which is something called your career sign, which I was saying a few moments ago. This is to wrap up a story that began in 2018, 2019. And for some Leos, not all, it's been kind of dramatic past 7 years with career changes, changes in your not just your professional life, but even like your values, or maybe it's played out in different ways in your life. But this is to, again, wrap up some story that began in 2018 and 2019, particularly around your ambitions and your public life. Virgo. So Mercury is your planet, and this week it turns retrograde in Sagittarius. So if you could see your astrology, Sagittarius forms the base and foundation of your chart. And it says to some degree, especially when Mercury will spend a lot of time in Sagittarius, at least until the 18th. It goes back into Scorpio. It'll go back into Sagittarius in December. but it's saying that you're sort of hitting a stretch that takes you into the end of the year where a lot of the focus is on home and family and roots and foundation. Really take note of the themes of the conversations or the ideas that are percolating, because they could very well weave their way into your experiences over the next 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks. Mercury turn retrograde is the one thing, especially because Mercury is going to be making 2 more oppositions to Uranus. It's like something wants to release from the past or help you to see things from a different perspective. Then there is Mars going to Sagittarius. So as I was saying a few moments ago, Sagittarius is what's called your 4th sign. It holds up your life. It is the base and foundation of your astrology. And Sagittarius, like Mars going to Sagittarius, it says that the home environment is not going to be a quiet place for the next 6 weeks. Maybe some of you are planning a move. Maybe you've got a lot of house guests, especially as we start to get towards the end of the year and holidays. Maybe you want to start what are those things called? Renovations, or like a home improvement. It's just like Mars typically says there's just a lot of activity that's happening in the home environment. So it's for you to feel how that is relevant in your own life. Now, with Uranus going into Sagittarius, it makes an opposition to Uranus and Gemini. So for you, Virgo, you are in the early stages of a career change. You may very well stay in the same industry. You may very well stay in the same job for the next 7 years, but something is shifting and you're in like the early parts of the story. It's for you to start to pick up on it. When Mars goes into Sagittarius, it makes that opposition to Uranus and Gemini. So maybe you get a job offer for something that you would have never have considered before. Maybe you have this new vision of how you want to, take your career. You want to make a, total like 180 career change. Maybe it's something else. But this is a big week for you. You've got shift points in important parts of your astrology with the Mercury turn retrograde and Mars going into Sagittarius opposite Uranus. Speaking of which, Uranus will leave Gemini. It will come back in April, but it will leave Gemini. It will go back into your 9th sign. So back in 2018, 2019, Uranus went into your 9th sign and started this illumination or transformation in how you see things, how you see the world, what you believe in, what you stand for. Faith, truth, meaning, education, travel, it's going to be different for every Virgos, but you've got something that needs to be wrapped up over the next 5 months before Uranus gets back into your career sign on April 25th of 2026. Also the full moon. The full moon puts the spotlight your 9th sign. So maybe you're planning a long distance journey. Maybe you are traveling to another country. Maybe it's education in nature. But that's where a lot of dynamic energy is happening at the moment. Libra. So Venus is your planet, and this week Venus is leaving Libra and it's going into Scorpio. So you've had over the last 4 weeks, you've had your planet Venus in your sign. It gives you a boost. It's about sort of the power being in your court, so to speak, new beginnings and renewal. When Venus goes into Scorpio, it goes into a sign that just from a traditional standpoint, it's not a home in. This is a Venus that isn't a doormat. This is a Venus that knows what it wants. It has desires. It's more aligned with themes around power and control, and perhaps even pleasure and seduction as well. But this is also a Venus, especially over the next 4 weeks, with the Sun in Scorpio, and even with the Scorpio new moon on the 20th of November, where there's financial matters to navigate over the next 4 to 6 weeks. It could be literally the money you make, the money you spend, the things that you invest in, or it could be a little bit more philosophical in nature, the sense of personal value and worth, and really making sure to get clear what's truly of value and importance to you. We have speaking of financial matters, we have a Taurus full moon on the 5th, and that full moon puts in the spotlight your 8th sign. So there's a lot of things that are happening in financial parts of your astrology, mortgages, spending, debt, 401k, benefits, planning for the future. And for some, it's not financial per se, especially with the full moon. It's really putting a spotlight on deeper emotional themes, the psyche, going within, and perhaps even seeing something for what it truly is. Venus is in a little bit of a tight spot this week. There's just way too much to cover, so I didn't get into the finer points of the full moon. And so maybe you feel like you're in a tight spot this week as well. And what I was noticing with this full moon is that it's saying something has to change. So for example, Libra, if you're always, putting other people's needs first, this is a full moon that's saying you can't do that anymore because perhaps it's working against you. That's just an example. It could be something else that's very specific to your life. But, you're kind of at a little bit of a tight spot this week, Libra. We do have Venus going to Scorpio, which I already said. Uranus going back into Taurus. So Taurus is something called your eighth sign. This has been since 2018, 2019. The eighth is typically a space that really talks about an internal process that's happening. Not everybody, you can't really see the eighth unless you're really revealing the things that are happening on the inside. It's trust, it's vulnerability, it's power, it's control, it's healing. It's to release yourself from the past and on some level reflect, Libra, reflect on the psychic landscape as it was, your internal psychic landscape as it was at the start of 2018 versus how it is now. What is your relationship with trust, power, control versus what it is now? If it's not psychological or even about intimacy and vulnerability, then maybe it is financial. I needed to make some financial changes over the last 7 years. But this is, Mars going into Sagittarius. Mars is going to go into Sagittarius on the 4th tomorrow. And Sagittarius is something called your third sign. It's about voice, it's about communication. And maybe with all this eighth house or I call it the eighth room activity, there's something that needs to be said this week. Maybe a conversation, maybe it's a little uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Maybe a secret that needs to be revealed. Maybe you need to reveal something about yourself, that sense of vulnerability, trust, power, and control. But it's saying that decisions need to be made this week and something that's trying to free you from the past. Scorpio. So Mars is your planet, and it's been nice the last 6 weeks. Mars has been in Scorpio since the end of September. So let's just say the energy, the ball has been in your court, like you've had the power. It's not to say that you don't have the power as Scorpio, but the energy is starting to move this week because tomorrow on the 4th, Mars goes into Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is something called your fourth sign. It's money, income, material stability, and security. It's literally the money that you make or the money you don't make, or maybe it's the money that you need. It's a sense of your basics, a sense of value and worth, and Mars is really motivating you and inspiring you to create that sense of material stability and security in your life. Now, when Uranus goes into Sagittarius, it makes an opposition to your Mars goes into Sagittarius, it makes an opposition to Uranus and Gemini. For you, and this is like a much bigger conversation, Uranus is in the early stages of its time in Gemini, your eighth sign. So there is something that's really like moving your internal psychic landscape this week. Maybe something wants to come up. Maybe you need to see something. Maybe it's sort of putting like a reality check, or maybe you need to go within. Maybe you need to spend some time reflecting. But it's a little bit of a jolt for you, Scorpio, this week, and that jolt could be about values and worth, self-worth and value. If something wants to illuminate something that you haven't seen, and this is all trying to get you to grow and evolve. Now, Scorpio, you will have a Taurus full moon this week as well on the 5th. Taurus is something called your relationship sign, your 7th sign. So it's about other people this week. I know it's your season. Happy birthday. This is a very dynamic full moon that's about relationships, and perhaps even the relationships that need to come to an end. They've reached their the natural point. And maybe that's sort of this realization this week of like, who do you really want in your life, especially as we go into a new year, because it's your birthday season. There will be, Uranus is going back into Taurus this week. I was saying this in the introduction, Scorpio, but it's like, go back and reflect, on your life in 2018, 2019 versus how it is now. I mean, I can speak from personal experience. Like, my life is like literally almost 180, maybe not 180, but like very different than it was in 2018, 2019. Uranus in your seventh sign of relationships, a lot of that energy has been focused on relationships. If it's not relationship changes over the past few years or new people coming into your life, it is to change how you relate and connect to people. And so over the next 5 months, you have some story that needs to wrap up. Maybe it's, the question is, have you learned your lesson, Scorpio? Or like, did you make the changes? Because this is the only time in your life, 2018-19 to 2025-2026, that you're going to have Uranus in your seventh sign of relationships. So start to really lean into or feel into what has needed to change in this domain, because you are again beginning to wrap up that story into April. There you go. Sagittarius. So we got a lot to talk about Sagittarius. First, let's start with Mars. So Mars is going into Sagittarius this week on the 4th, so that's tomorrow. And Sagittarius, hey, that's you, or that's your rising sign. So when Mars in Scorpio, which it has been for the last 6 weeks, you've needed to take time off. You needed to go within. You needed to rest and prepare. When Mars goes into Sagittarius, it like gives you all that power. And whether you are Sag Sun or you're Sag Rising, you really feel that sense of renewal and new beginning. The thing is, when Mars goes into Sagittarius, it starts to oppose Uranus, which is in Gemini, at least until Friday. And Gemini is your relationship sign. You are in the early stages, Sagittarius, of some sort of big change. I know that's a big thing to say, but I cannot underplay as an astrologer the presence of Uranus in your relationship sign for the better part of the next 7 years. July to November is a preview of something. The question is, what is it? It's going to be very specific to your life. Uranus and Gemini will either say relationships have to radically change, or how you do relationships, meaning how you connect, relate, socialize, advocate for yourself, has to radically change. Uranus goes back into Taurus this week on the 7th. It goes back into what's called your sign of health and wellness, work and projects. But before it does that, Mars makes the opposition to Uranus. So it's a bit of a spicy week. And you all will live that in your own way. But it sort of kicks off this energy of new beginnings. It's a very dynamic energy. And it's for you to just listen and feel what this is going to mean for you. Because when Mars is in Sagittarius, which it will be, I think it's until the 13th of December, or maybe it's 13th or 15th, I can't remember. But it's going to start to activate eclipse degrees. The energy of that lunar eclipse in Pisces, which is your sign of home and family, on September 7th, and also that eclipse that we had, that solar eclipse on September 21st, which is in your professional life, your career, your 10th sign, your public life. So things are starting to move. The story is starting to get activated. You still have Saturn in your 4th sign of home and family for the next 4 months. Maybe it's the next 3 months. I have to do the math. And so there's this idea of like wanting to or needing to wrap up this story around home and family over the next few months. This will take you into February. We also have Mercury turning retrograde this week. Mercury is a career planet for you. It's a relationship planet for you. So it just sort of adds to this mix that that the narrative is changing, but at the same time, it's to go back to old stories and to wrap them up. And maybe with Mercury changing directions, it's opposite Uranus. It's to see things from a very different perspective, so you can make different choices, especially as you go into 2026. Oh, I should also say before, it's just so much to do. There is a full moon this week for you, Sagittarius. This full moon is in your sixth sign of work, projects, health, wellness. This is a full moon to really take action on a health matter, to take your vitamins, eat your vegetables. This is playing off of a season, Scorpio season, which is about going within, releasing, letting go, and making space for the new things that want to come into your life. Um, Capricorn. Capricorn. So Saturn is your planet, and Saturn, as you know, it is in its last stretch. I can't do simple math when I'm trying to use my astrology brain. So we've got December, January, February. So we have 3 months, a little over 3 months with Saturn left in Pisces. So this is the last time for 30 years that Saturn is going to be in this space in your astrology. So you are wrapping up, you're continuing to wrap up big stories around voice, communication, learning, the choices that you're making, being the authority, and really being the master, and very conscientious of the choices and the directions that you're taking your life in. That said, we have Mars going into Sagittarius. Sagittarius is something called your 12th sign. When Mars gets to the 12th, which it does every 2 years, so give or take roughly every, this time every 2 years, you're beginning to come to the end of a personal chapter. And when Mars goes in the 12th, it's about letting go. It's releasing, to that sense of releasing so that new space can come in, especially when Mars goes into Capricorn. And Mars will go into Capricorn either it's the 13th of December, 15th, I can't remember. And that for you is going to be like a reset and new beginning that comes right before your own season, whether you are Capricorn Sun or Capricorn Rising. So for the next 6 weeks, it's about downshifting, getting quiet. And I think even with Saturn in your third and Pisces, it's about really making sure that you're cultivating your intuition, your intuitive voice. When Mars goes into Sagittarius, it opposes Uranus. Uranus has made its first, since July, its first few times in something called your sixth sign, whether that's work or projects or even your health and wellness. It's a confrontational energy that may play out in very subtle ways. So maybe this is where you really need to listen to your intuition, because maybe the confrontational energy is coming from an internal message. You realize something, it's the inner voice that we all have that we need to listen to, but maybe we don't listen to enough. Maybe it's about making some changes in your life, or reprioritizing your things, or reshifting things in your life. Now, Mars for you is a planet that talks about home and family. So that sense of coming to an end, that making space, is perhaps in the home environment. If it's not literally in the home environment, it could also be about that internal psychic landscape that we all have, that contains past memories, and mom and dad, and childhood memories, and ancestors, and maybe something needs to go, because when Saturn gets into Aries in February, and it will be there for 2 years, you're trying to create very new foundations and put down very new roots in your life. So what needs to leave in advance of that? We do a Taurus full moon this week. Taurus is something called your, I gotta do the math. Taurus is something called your fifth sign. This is a full moon that puts you in the spotlight in a way. It's about your creativity, it's yourself, it's your identity, it's your talents, gifts, your abilities. For some, it's about children. This full moon is really playing off of your 11th house of friends and community, but also the future. And I think it's really to reconsider the future that you're creating, because I think a lot of things are moving for Capricorn. And this is to clear space for a lot of the new beginnings that want to come into your life. Aquarius. So Saturn is your planet, and you got 3 more months left of Saturn in your financial sign. I'm going to tell a little funny story because my dad's an Aquarius, and I sort of see how the astrology unfolds and the people that are very close in my life. And my father had to recruit, he had a like a like a like a like a computer hack, and so he in the abundance of caution, he got all new bank accounts. Like he created new accounts and moved everything over. Very laborious, as you can imagine. But it was a very interesting manifestation of this time that's about financial matters for Aquarius. And there's also the symbology of new accounts, and even though it's perhaps same money and resources, but in sort of a new psychic space. That's obviously a very specific example, but maybe in your own way, it's like, how have you been using the past couple of years, or maybe with the with the eclipse that we had back on September 7th, to really create new things in your financial spheres and realms. Scorpio season for you is a time where the sun is going through your 10th sign of career, your public life, your public reputation. And so this is a time could be quite busy, or you have responsibilities and duties in the world. The full moon, which is on the 5th, is in your sign of home and family. It's putting the spotlight on your home environment. There could be changes in the household. Somebody moves in, somebody moves out. Maybe you're planning a move. Maybe you want to make changes in your living situation on a sort of aesthetic level. Or maybe it's about shifting your priorities, shifting your values, and reinvesting time and energy into the things that really matter, because this sort of is the culmination of some of these shifts in values and financial, but maybe even shift in internal values that have been happening over the past couple of years. Mars going to Sagittarius for you. Sagittarius is your 11th sign. It says for the next 6 weeks, the short-term priority, the immediate priority is your friends, your community. You are socializing more. Maybe you're getting involved in your community, you're volunteering, or whatever it is that's relevant to your life. Now, with Mars in Sagittarius, it begins to oppose Uranus and Gemini, which is in your 5th sign. You are in the early stages of some sort of personal reinvention. It's hard to say what it is because it's going to be so specific to for you and for your own life. Uranus in Gemini says that over the next 7 years is to reveal the true self, to release yourself from anything that's not truly who you are. It's to open up your talents, your gifts, your abilities, and to rediscover what your identity is. It's hard to say what that is, but Uranus has been in Gemini since July 7th until this week, and then it leaves. It goes back to Taurus. And it's for you to really feel into what are these themes around self and your community and how you express yourself that are really coming up this week with the Mars-Uranus opposition. Uranus is going back into Taurus, and Taurus is something called your 4th sign. Home, family, roots, foundation. Same place that we're having the full moon this week, except Uranus went into this space in 2018 and 19. Maybe home and family mean something completely different to you in 2025 than it did in 2018-19. Maybe your household has radically changed. Maybe you have moved. Maybe your relationship with family has radically changed. Or maybe it's not that. Maybe you feel more at home within yourself, or maybe you feel like you can put down roots. Whatever is going on in your life, you've got 5 more months to wrap up some sort of great story, because this is the only time that Uranus is going to be in this part of your astrology. What else do we have going on? We also have Venus going to Scorpio. Scorpio is a career part of your chart, so you just got a lot of activity, but tis the season to focus on your professional life, your duties, responsibilities in the world, your ambitions, but also your career. Finally, Pisces. I know I've got so much going on this week. Pisces, last but not least, Jupiter is your planet. Jupiter has been in Cancer since this past July. It'll be in Cancer until next July. So this is a time that continues to be about creativity, joy, fun. Even if you're scratching your head and be like, I'm not having enough fun. What about you? But Jupiter in the sign is saying, I need to fulfill myself. I need to make sure that I'm nourishing the things that actually light me up and give me joy. And this is going to take you into 2026. We have a full moon this week. This full moon is in something called your, wait, did I do? Gotta do the math. It's in, this full moon is in Taurus, which is something called your third sign. So this is a full moon where maybe you've got things to say. Maybe it's busy. Sometimes when there's energy in what's called the third sign, we've just got a lot of things going on, the text messages, the appointments, and it really creates a bit of a busy and frenetic energy. This full moon maybe says that you have something to say. Maybe it's saying that you also need to put the focus on your education, or maybe you're just taking a trip and traveling. This Scorpio season is typically a time for you to look out towards the world, to plan long distance travel and trips, and maybe to even, again, focus on your education. Mercury is turning retrograde this week. It turns retrograde on the 9th. Mercury is both a planet that talks about your home, your family, your living situation. It also talks about relationships. So if something is coming up with this Mercury retrograde, it's very possible that it's not, it needs to play out. We have to get into December before we get all the information. Mercury is going to turn retrograde in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is your career sign. So the path that's being retraced is through your professional life, your public life, your public realm, and back into a space that really talks about, but what do you believe in? What do you stand for? And maybe the back and forth is making sure that either you're being very true to your convictions in your public life or your career, or you need to make sure that there's a value alignment in your professional life. Then there's Mars going to Sagittarius, and Sagittarius again is your career sign. So this takes the energy of action, immediacy. Mars is always our short-term priority, and it's saying over the next 6 weeks, your public life, public reputation, and your career is your priority. Except when Mars goes into Sagittarius, it immediately makes an opposition to Uranus. Now, this is the other thing that's happening with Sagittarius with Pisces, is that you are in the early stages of some sort of bigger change in the domain of home, family, roots, foundation. It's going to be different for every Pisces, but the Gemini holds up your chart. It forms the roots, it forms the base, it talks about ancestors, it's your living situation, it's your address. And to have Uranus there, even though it's just from July 7th to November 7th of this year, it goes back April 25th of 2026, the sort of the psychic axis and maybe even the tectonic plates, so to speak, of your life are beginning to shift and move. So take note of whatever is going on this week. It's kind of some spicy astrology for you Pisces, because it's really playing out in family, it's playing out in your professional life, and maybe it's something very specific for you. But it's a turning point energy, and maybe with Mercury turning retrograde again, it's to really reevaluate things and to sort of play out a story that, into December, because you need to see things from a lot of different perspectives. Uranus will go back into Taurus this week. It goes back into your third sign, voice communication, how you think and listen and learn. It is to wrap up a story over the next 5 months that began back in 2018-19. Maybe how you speak is different than 2018-2019. Maybe you found your voice. Maybe you're a writer now. Maybe you've changed your education. It's to really, we don't always see Uranus so literally, but it's just to sort of feel and observe what this 7 years has meant for you, because this is the only time in your life you will have Uranus in this part of your chart. So it represents something that your soul needs to transform and evolve. And if it is to find your power of your voice, then that could be very much what you're wrapping up as you get into April. So there you go. That is your look at the astrology of this week, November 3rd through 9th, 2025. It's like 8 minutes past the hour. Yeah, we've had a lot of things to cover this week. We will definitely resurface a lot of it next week so we can sort of integrate with these sort of bigger movements, and maybe we'll have an idea of what this full moon or what Mars and Sagittarius opposite Uranus actually mean for our lives. So having said all of that, that is your look at the astrology this week. You can book a consultation with me. Go to empoweringastrology.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Spotify. I'm on YouTube. All the links are in the show notes, and I will see you all next week. Take care.